I'm Gavin Potenza.
And I'm Liz Meyer.
I work on a lot of infographics, maps, icons, and illustrations.
I am also an information designer, but mostly an illustrator. We've gotten to work with so many really great clients throughout the years that we think that we can really help you guys learn about how to make infographics in a really beautiful way.
Infographics are basically just a great way at showcasing a large amount of information in a really contained space. It's kind of captivating, it's engaging, it's smart, and it's kind of like a tool for learning or sharing a lot of information.
Yeah, and the best part about infographics is that the amount of data that you can get on that page is basically like a 25-page paper. In the first class, we want to take it down to the most basic level, use a very small timeline, use information from your own life, and create something that you can hold on to and you can share with your friends.
We're focusing on a visual story, that's existing within your own life.
For the intermediate class, the assignment is a lot more like an editorial situation where we would give you a set of data to work from, and then you have to apply it onto a map.
You'll go through this process of having to narrow down this crazy set of information and finding the best way to visualize this information accurately and effectively. Hey everyone, welcome to Beginning Infographics, information-driven storytelling.
In this class, we're going to be taking you through the process of creating a simple graphic that will illustrate a timeline-based story.
But before we get into all that fun stuff, we need to explore the idea of infographics. So what are they exactly? As simply put as possible, infographics are about taking the complex and simplifying it. It's taking a bit of raw data and transforming it into a visual object.
So why did infographics first get used?
Going all the way back, you could actually make the case that cave paintings and hieroglyphics are actually, in fact, different kinds of infographics. They're telling stories and they're verbal without using words. But when we think of what we normally consider infographics, those actually began popping up in the late 18th century, mostly for fiscal statistics, political and accounting purposes. In the mid to late 1800s, statistics from medical research was being used to help create social change by visualizing important data. Then, in the 1900s, a steady progression of illustrated information began appearing across Europe and America, including star and other sorts of charts, mathematical graphs, train and subway maps, and eventually illustrated articles. In the early days of printing, there was a need for simplifying knowledge to reach mass audiences. The illustrated elements help distill the information into digestible portions that can communicate to all different kinds of people.
So now we know how infographics came about. We'll see how they're defined today.
I would actually define an infographic as a simple illustrated composition that lays out a set of information or data about a subject. That subject might need a bit of a graphic boost to make it more interesting or digestible.
So as you can see, this is our definition of what infographics are. They fall under the category of information design, so any sort of designing that uses information in a visual way. So under information design also lies the term data visualization. So what is that? What's data visualization? So we consider this the top tier of the infographic chain. This style of graphic uses a lot of data points, very little use of illustration, and is a much more complex composition. More often than not, to tackle one of these sorts of pieces, you'll be dealing with an extremely lengthy Excel file and will probably need the aid of graphing software or something of the sort to help sort out the data. So why do we see so many infographics on the internet? Well, people use infographics to get a ton of information out there to satisfy the audience's ever-growing need for more information. We need more all the time. Stuff that needed to get pushed out quickly and to get the attention of a ton of people well, it's the best way to do it.
So with all that, a lot of people are just doing really amazing things with infographics and data visualization. And the opportunities just seem to keep growing as all this new technology comes out and all these new data tracking softwares. And just as the amount of data that keeps growing, the need to visualize that data keeps growing as well.
So, now that you're all excited about infographics, we're going to go back to the basics. We're going to be focusing on the most basic of information graphics, the timeline. So there are a couple different ways of looking at infographics in general. One being location, another being time, and the third being hierarchy. The important thing with infographics is that we're transforming these ideas into an engaging story, so storytelling using data. So your assignment for this class is creating a timeline, something that's really personal to you, something that happened during your day, or something of the sort. So first you want to figure out the story that you want to tell. Next, you'll want to figure out the kind of data that you'll need to tell that story. So if you're thinking about the story, it could be a personal list, it could be what you ate, who you talked to that day, where you shopped, etc. Then you're going to use tools to track your information. Are you going to use an actual notepad, or are you going to use your iPhone? There are very many apps that you can use on your phone to track different things. So if you're going to track where you went that day, you can use this app called Moves, and it'll track your location and where you went. If you want to track what you ate that day, you can use one of the many daily tracker food apps or calorie apps out there. Another option is Open Paths, where you can track your actual steps during the day and how far you've gone, and you can export that to your computer. While you're gathering this data, you're going to want to think about the supplemental information that can really help explain your story visually. So if you're talking about going and meeting your friends, when you met your friend, what time was it? What kind of weather was it like outside? All of these different things can really help round out your story and really help make a very compelling visual journey. In the next class, we're going to get really into it and how we can start sketching and figure things out visually on a page and really use your data that you've gathered. So for right now, we want you to go out, go live your life, and track something throughout your day, something that'll really mean something to you, so that you can come out of this class with a really compelling personal project. Hey guys, so now that you've learned a bit about the history of infographics, it's time to get started on your own project. So we're going to take you through the production of our own joint graphic so that you can see what the process is like and hopefully use our tips to create your own. So for the assignment, we chose to write down everything we ate in one day. In particular, this is my day. It started off pretty healthy and slowly degenerated into a pizza party, but that's okay, right? So using this data, as I'd call it, we're going to begin the sketching phase. We're going to talk about the text and how we can determine what is necessary. So since we have such a small amount of data here, basically everything should be used, and perhaps we can even figure out other things that we can put in there to make it have some context or give it a little bit more life. If we're looking at this list of food, we start to see that it's, there's a timeline there, there's a clear linear path down the side. And so my first idea would always be to go start like a journey sort of thing. So, create like some sort of a line, a linear path. So maybe it could go like this. So these are super, super rough sketches, FYI. This is the beginning stages, so don't worry about how it looks yet. This is for your eyes only, or your client eyes might see these eventually, but probably not. So I'm just going to start marking off just really, really basic things. So start at 9 a.m. is the first time, and then 9:30 p.m. is at the bottom. So we're getting a very, very, short little blip of information there. So then, that could be a nice little composition. We can even, flesh that out a little bit if we like that later. Another option, I think, for my timeline in particular, could be some sort of like a pie chart. So a pie chart, it can do a lot in terms of explaining certain kinds of data that, a linear timeline wouldn't quite capture. So if I'm talking about some sort of a pie chart, with that, obviously start with that circle. With that, I'm probably going to pull out certain information so I apparently had coffee several times that day. I had 3 cups of coffee. So 3 coffee. And then, we can look at different things because everything else was 1. So we have 1 of everything else. So we'll just, make a little note for ourselves for later. So essentially what you're going to be left with, you're going to have a big chart, a big pie piece for the coffee, and then single pieces for the rest of the food. So I don't know if that's actually going to tell my story as well as I would like it to, though, because it's not quite, it doesn't really explain the time as well as I would like to. But what that looks like that looks like a clock in a way. So that's another option. Clock, like the face of a clock, could be interesting. So then at, the different times, I can mark off different things. So coffee was here, grapefruit, another coffee here, 1:30 p.m. Well, see, then that starts to get a little confusing for me. So then you can start to see when you start to look at it and you go through it and try different ideas, that starts to get a little confusing because how am I going to actually show 1:30 on one piece of information there? So maybe the clock won't actually work, but I like this idea. I like that idea, and maybe I can incorporate like a clock face into it, perhaps. So maybe I can incorporate that somehow, and I'll just keep a note of that for myself. Another way I can probably go through this information and tell the story. I'm just going to switch to a pen here so I don't shake the camera. Another way is I could do some sort of like a grid. I could go do like a 12-hour grid since it's only 12 hours, or I can do 24-hour, but for right now we'll start with a 12-hour grid. So 3 times 4 is 12, so we need to have, that is okay. So that way I can do some sort of a thing like 9 a.m. is here, 9:30, make it, whatever, approximately. And then I can do some sort of like a cool idea that way. That could be really interesting. So just do like coffee, whatever, grapefruit, grapes, little cute thing there. 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, see, that's not going to work. So that won't work, but maybe we can modify it somehow. We'll just fudge it for right now since it's a sketch. So if we did another coffee, and then maybe like a cheeseburger here, cheeseburger, some cookies, then almonds, coffee, then pizza, and then red wine. So, you know, that could be pretty cool. Yeah, I think I kind of like that. So, as you can see, though, my initial thought is to always just put icons in to compositions just because it makes them look a little bit more interesting and it gives me a little bit more to work with. So it could be a good idea to start thinking about where you can use some sort of things like icons or illustration in there, like I said earlier. And, you know, really give your, but don't really like look too much into the icons yet. Just if you need to use them now just for visual purposes, for your own sake, to try to lay things out, that would be great. But you really want to give the data the most importance for right now, just for, you know, the sake of actually sketching things out. What we're going to do, I'm going to make this sketch look a little bit more presentable. Since this is my chosen sketch, I'm going to try to figure out how this is all actually going to lay out on the page so that when I go to digitize the sketch, it actually makes more sense. So I'm going to, again, do this grid. And then I'm going to start laying things out appropriately. So since an infographic can be both conceptual or completely accurate, I think for this one, since it's not going to be completely accurate with this layout, so if I want it to be a little bit more conceptual, I don't actually have to make it work perfectly within the grid. So what I can do is I can break it down. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I have 10 pieces of information that I need to put on this grid here that, you know, may or may not need to sit within the right box. So that leaves 2 pieces open, which is interesting. So then I'll have a little bit of space to work with, potentially for text or anything like that. So first, you know, I think I'm going to just do it one per grid. So that's a grapefruit. That's the grapes. Here's coffee. It's weird. Here's cheeseburger. Have to make the seeds, of course. Some cookies. Lots and lots of cookies, because I like cookies a lot. And we've got some almonds, which could totally look like cookies if you're not careful. And another coffee. Give it a little dip for fun. And then some wine. Then we have two open pieces for text. So since I really like that clock face idea that I did earlier, maybe I can sort of try to incorporate that here somehow. So I could do something like 9 a.m. a.m. so that there's some context to it. Nope, I messed up. 1:30. See, it does not have to be perfect. Do not worry about making a beautiful sketch yet. Just try to get your ideas down. My opinion is as quickly as possible so that you don't miss anything. So you might, you could have this beautiful creative moment and you might miss it because you were too worried about making something perfect. Okay, so maybe I could do like a little clock face or something like that. So 9 a.m. Same. 10:10. Okay, 11:30. 1:30. 3:35. 4:40. Looks like 4:45. Whatever. 8 p.m. Whoops, that's 9 p.m. 8. 9:30. And obviously these look like pie charts right now, but you know, you get the gist, and I get the gist, and that's all that really matters in the sketch phase. Reiterated several times now. Okay, so I think actually I am ready to get going on the vectorization part. So we need to remember what the really important steps of the sketching phase is. So we need to think about how to visualize your data. Do we need icons? Do we need any illustration to accompany the data to make it visual and make it speak to the viewer without actually using words? What kind of text is necessary? Out of all the data, do you need text to accompany it? Do you need it to be explained in any way? If so, you need to start thinking about that now. So everyone has to deal with time with their project so that everyone can help each other out and that there's a running theme within all of the projects, that everyone's on the same page. So the foundation of time is basically the backbone or bones to the entire piece. Each bit of information that you gather will have revolved around a certain time, so it's one running theme that will help guide the graphic and have it make sense. So once you've gotten these bones down, which is represented by the sketch that we're making, we're going to have to start thinking about what information accompanies and complements the foundation and really begins telling a full story, something that really gives the graphic life. For our purposes here, we're going to call our running theme of time the bones, and all the extraneous, changeable information the meat. The foundation carries and supports the context and content so that there is a full story being told. Think of it like a line graph. The x and y axis are the bones, and the line as the meat. Without one or the other, you still have an image, but the story isn't complete. So I hope this helped, and the next lecture will be on how to digitize and how to finalize your piece so that you have something that looks like an actual infographic and not just like a terrible pencil sketch. So get ready and get excited. You're on your way to making an infographic.
So now we've got our sketch, and hopefully we've got some good feedback as well. Now we're going to start bringing our graphic to life. I always like to have a plan of attack, though, between sketch phase and the final draft phase. So let's start to think about how this will look in its final form, in full color and with all of our visuals fully visualized. What colors will we use? How's our hierarchy? What's reading first, second, third? Is our message being received? Is it fun? Is it visually interesting? This way we can start to see what we may want to change up as we start to take it to final. For mine, the layout could use some improvement. It's a little basic right now, and I think it could add a lot to play with how my food items are laid out. We'll see though as we start to get into it. We want to start by setting up the frame for in which this will live. How big do we want this to be? Does it need to fit within browsers, emails, 8.5 by 11 paper? Where is it going to live and how much space should we be giving it? For mine, I want it to live on my blog, so a rectangle should be able to house all my information, and maybe we'll give it like 800 pixels in width. We've got our frame. Let's start recreating all of our elements that we've sketched out. So let's start getting the framework down and drawing up all of our icons and the rest of our visuals. Here's where we can really start playing with color as well. In my case, colors are really important for communicating food, but I want mine to be a bit brighter. So I'm going to make sure all my food items are communicating really clearly. Like almonds are brown, the hamburger's obviously brown, cheese has got to be yellow, but I'm just going to make them a little bit brighter. I also want to make sure I'm not using up too many colors. So I'm going to be reusing the same browns and all the same reds for the wine and the grapes, same yellows for every instance of yellow. This just helps keep things pretty consistent. You know, too many colors will really clutter everything and can confuse your message and data. Let's add our title to the piece now. Here we're going to start thinking a little bit about hierarchy and the way things are communicating. Ideally, we want, our graphic and illustrations to be the first read. We want to draw the viewer's eye in with the graphic. Then we want the title to give the whole piece a little context as the second most important piece of information. We can also begin rethinking our title. Hopefully, we've learned a little something from the project about ourselves and from the data we've collected. So this can actually inform the title. We don't want to give the whole project away. The data and the graphic are what provide the answers. The title should just be a little clue in. In our case, we started with what I ate today, and now I see we've eaten a whole bunch of pizza, and this happened on a Monday. So maybe something like Mondays are for pizza would be a pretty fun title. We can also add in a little subtitle like a visual food diary, which helps explain the whole project a little bit. So things are really starting to take shape now. Let's take a closer look at how everything's reading. It's looking pretty straightforward. Each food item gets its own box, which is nice and consistent. There are 3 levels: food, title, and subtitle. This was something we considered in the sketch phase, and it looks like it's holding up pretty well in the final process as well. But maybe I want to give a little more emphasis to pizza. This was my most important meal after all, since it's in the title, and I think it actually helps strengthen the story. You always want to look for those subtle opportunities within that can really help transform your story. Little background details or small things that can help give better insight into your experience or what you're communicating. So I've used pizza here and I've broken up the grid. So pizza's actually taking up 2 boxes now, which I think is kind of fun and gives just a little more importance to pizza. If everything's looking and reading great, now we can go back and make sure it's as visually interesting as it can be. Depending on where it's going to live, it might need to really stand out with some bright colors or visuals. If it's sitting on a white page, maybe you want a really dark background. We don't really want to distort our graphics and information too much, but sometimes a few adjustments can really help out. I think mine is definitely going to need a darker background color, some kind of color that will really help my bright foods pop out. I'm also going to think about how I can change up the layout so it's not so structured and uniform. Maybe I can space out the visuals a little bit and integrate the title in there. I think this graphic is a little more on the fun side, and doing this won't really compromise its legibility or readability. This also really helps draw the viewer's eye in, and it's kind of creating this rhythm, which helps its visual impact. Sometimes adding a little bit of extra info can really help strengthen your story. I wanted to share this one example of this Always with Honor graphic. It's their Oregon Trail map. This map documents their road trip across the country, and at the bottom you can see that they've listed out all the animals that they saw along the way and all the music that they listened to on their trip. Seeing this really helps imagine their experience while traveling. In fact, you could probably envision a whole new map just based on the animal sightings, which I think could be pretty fun. Going back to my map, I think I want to add in the time. I'm going to use clocks to visualize the time. It's just going to be these little icons in the background. This way, now that the icons are a little more spread out, this just provides a little bit of background context that can help guide the viewer through the whole graphic. Now it's time to add those last few small details. Maybe you wanted to hand draw the type or add confetti all over it because it was about someone's birthday. This is your chance to really personalize it. Be careful not to alter it too much though. We want our data to still be accurate and represented properly, but we want to just add a little bit of flair if and when we can. Don't forget to give yourself credit. This is your graphic based on your own data, and you want to make sure to stamp your name on it. These graphics can be pinned all over to Pinterest or get thrown on Tumblr, and no matter how far it travels from you and where you originally posted it or published it, your name will always be on it. This is also where we'd normally list our sources, where we've gotten our data from, but since we sourced all of our own data from our own lives, just putting our names on it should be fine.
Okay, so now we should all have an engaging and exciting infographic that tells all of our stories really well. So please share your pieces in your project panel so that you can get feedback from your peers and that hopefully you can use that feedback to create an even more amazing project. Thanks, guys.